One word to describe my life before meeting Milo. Stable. Not too sad, not too happy. A straight line stretching through mornings with cold coffee, repetitive subway rides, and polite conversations just courteous enough that no one probes deeper. I lived in Brooklyn, in a small apartment overlooking a noisy street where car horns blended with people's laughter, and everyone seemed in a hurry towards something more important than themselves. I was 29, working as a content editor for an online magazine about urban architecture. A job that had me spending most of my time observing how people build living spaces, but rarely thinking about what I was building for my own heart. I was gay. That wasn't a secret to anyone anymore, not even my family in Oregon. But being open didn't mean I was ready to love. My past relationships were like short-term rentals. Comfortable enough, warm enough, but no one wanted to stay long. Milo entered my life on an October afternoon, when New York was at its most beautiful. Leaves changing colors, golden sunlight slanting through the large glass windows of the coffee shop where I often worked. I was typing midway through an article when the Wi-Fi crashed. I sighed, looked up, and that's when I saw him. Milo was at the counter ordering, wearing a simple gray sweater, brown hair slightly messy as if he never really bothered to comb it neatly. He smiled at the barista. A comfortable smile, not showy, but enough to soften the space around him. I didn't believe in love at first sight, but I believed in moments that made your heart skip a beat without reason. Sorry. Milo turned to me when he saw me fiddling with my laptop. The Wi-Fi here crashes a lot. I usually download my stuff in advance. I laughed, a bit surprised that he was talking to me like we'd known each other forever. Thanks. I guess today is the day I should quit early. Or the day to talk to strangers, he said, shrugging. Milo. Everett. We shook hands. His palm was warm, the grip just right. Not rushed, not hesitant. A small detail, but strangely I remembered it clearly. We sat at the same table. Milo was a user experience designer for a health tech startup. He talked about his work with rare focus, his eyes lighting up as he explained how a good interface could make someone's life easier. I realized I was listening not just to the story, but to how Milo chose his words, his silences, the rhythm of the conversation. There was a brief moment when I realized we were both gay. No dramatic confession, no direct questions. Just small pieces, the way he referred to his ex with he, the way his gaze lingered on me a little longer when I talked about failed dates. Everything felt so natural that I wasn't scared. We left the coffee shop as it started getting dark. Streetlights came on, the city shifting to a different rhythm. Slower, deeper. Milo asked if I wanted to walk a bit. I nodded. We talked about everything. Movies, cities we'd lived in, feeling lonely in crowds. Milo said he'd moved to New York 3 years ago, carrying a broken relationship and a fragile belief that in a place this big, he'd find himself again. I'm not good at starting over, he said, his voice lowering. But I'm good at staying if it's worth it. That sentence followed me all the way home. That night, lying in bed, I realized I was smiling unconsciously. I thought about Milo, about how he listened, how he didn't try to be interesting, how he was fully present. I didn't know where things would go. I just knew, for the first time in a long while, I wanted to try building something. Not rushed, not noisy, but gentle enough for both of us to stay. And I had no idea that Milo was lying somewhere in this city, thinking about me in a very similar way. A message the next morning. Everett, that coffee shop opens earlier than I thought. If you're free, I'll buy you a cup, this time with more stable Wi-Fi. I read it twice before replying. Sounds like a perfect plan. We met more often than I'd allowed myself in recent years. Not labeled dates, but evenings cooking together in Milo's apartment. Sunday afternoons wandering old bookstores in Soho, or late nights sitting on my stoop, sharing a cigarette even though neither of us smoked regularly. Milo had a unique gentleness. He didn't rush to touch me, didn't ask deep questions too soon. But every time I said something incomplete, he waited. Waited for me to find the right words. Waited for me to be ready. One evening, while we were doing dishes, Milo asked, "Are you afraid of love?" I froze, my hands still under the warm water. I didn't expect him to ask so directly. But his voice wasn't interrogating, just genuinely curious. I'm afraid of building something, I said slowly, and then finding out it's not solid enough. Milo nodded. I'm afraid of staying in something that's collapsing. We looked at each other. In that moment, I understood that our wounds weren't the same, but our fears touched at the same point. Milo told me about his previous relationship. A man 6 years older, smart, ambitious, and always planning everything except Milo's emotions. He'd stayed too long, hoping one day he'd be important enough to be chosen. I learned that love shouldn't be a waiting game, Milo said. But leaving isn't easy either. I told him about my relationships, how I withdrew as soon as things got serious. I was good at disappearing before anyone could hurt me. You always leave first, Milo said softly. Not an accusation, just a fact laid on the table. That night, Milo stayed. We lay next to each other, not touching too much, as if we were both learning to be present with someone else without defenses. When Milo slept, I watched him for a long time. Light from the street filtered in, casting faint shadows on his face. I thought about building, about foundations, about patience. In the days that followed, my feelings for Milo grew, slow but steady. I liked how he made coffee, always measuring the grounds precisely like a ritual. I liked how he read the news, muttering critiques at the screen. I liked even the silences when we were together without needing to speak. But happiness, I learned, often comes with fear. One evening, when Milo held my hand in a crowded street, my heart tightened, not from shame, but because I realized I had so much to lose. I let go of his hand, pretending to adjust my coat. Milo didn't say anything then, but later on the sofa he asked, "Do you feel unsafe with me?" That question hurt more than I expected. "No," I replied quickly. "It's just, I'm not used to it." Milo looked at me for a long time. "I don't need you to get used to it right away. I just need you not to run." We didn't argue, but a tiny crack appeared between us. Small enough that outsiders wouldn't see, but enough for me to realize I was facing a familiar choice. Withdraw or stay and repair. That night, Milo kissed me for the first time. Not rushed, not urgent. Just lips touching lips, like an unspoken promise. I kissed back, heart racing, a mix of fear and desire spreading through my body. In Milo's arms, I realized I wanted this, wanted him, wanted days with him in them. But wanting wasn't enough. I knew I'd have to learn to stay, even when fear whispered that I should run. And that was just the beginning of the gentleness we were trying to build. We didn't name our relationship right away. Milo didn't ask, "What are we?" And I didn't volunteer an answer. There was an unspoken agreement between us, that the present was enough, that we didn't need to push things faster than our hearts. But day by day, Milo wove deeper into my life in natural ways. He appeared on my shopping list, almond milk he liked, whole grain bread. He left his toothbrush at my place. First, just in case I stay over, then never took it back. I started scheduling around his work hours, noticing it with a smile that was both resigned and content. We began to be intimate in ways beyond just the body. There were mornings Milo woke first, made coffee, then came back to bed, placing the cup in my hand and kissing my forehead lightly. There were nights I held him from behind, listening to his breathing even out, feeling the trust placed fully on my chest. We touched each other, skin to skin, warm and slow, but what moved me most was how Milo looked at me afterward, as if he wasn't in a hurry to leave. The first time we truly belonged to each other was on a rainy night. A sudden spring storm poured over the city, heavy drops making the windows rattle slightly. Milo had just had a bad day at work, a project canceled, a tense meeting. He walked into my place with slumped shoulders, his usual smile gone. I didn't ask much. I just pulled him into my arms. Milo rested his forehead on my shoulder, letting out a long breath. "I'm tired," he said. Just 2 words, but they held an entire day. We lay on the bed, dim lights, rain as background to a comfortable silence. I stroked his back lightly, feeling his breath slow. When his lips found mine, there was no explosion, just certainty, as if we both knew this was where we belonged in that moment. Milo's body was warm and familiar, like a home I was learning to call my own. We didn't rush. Every touch was deliberate, every breath in sync. In that moment, I didn't think about tomorrow, didn't think about fear. Just Milo, just the present. Afterward, we lay side by side, naked and peaceful. Milo turned to me, his eyes softening. Everett. He called my name like it was something very important. Do you feel safe? I thought for a moment before answering. Yes, I said, and this time I knew I wasn't lying. But happiness rarely comes without challenges. A few weeks later, I was offered a new position at work, a big opportunity, but it came with the possibility of moving to Chicago for at least a year. I read the email 3 times, my heart excited and heavy. The first thing I thought of wasn't the salary or prestige. It was Milo. That evening, I told him. Milo listened carefully, as he always did. When I finished, he was silent for a while. Do you want to go? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me does. The other part is here. Milo nodded, but I saw his eyes darken. I don't want to be the reason you give up anything. That sentence, said with care, still made me feel an invisible distance appear. I realized that this time, it wasn't just my own fear being tested. It was the gentleness we were building, whether it was strong enough to withstand life's big decisions. That night, we held each other for a long time, but I felt Milo holding back part of his emotions. And I knew the days ahead would force me to face what I'd always avoided, choosing between chasing my own future or staying to build one with someone. After that email, things between Milo and me didn't shatter, but they weren't seamless anymore. We still met, still had dinners, still shared a bed. But new silences appeared, longer, heavier. I noticed Milo starting to weigh his words, as if afraid of accidentally burdening me. And I, for the first time, hesitated over a career opportunity not from fear of failure, but from fear of losing someone. One Friday evening, Milo invited me to his best friend Jonah's birthday at a small bar near East Village. Normally I'd say yes right away, but that day I almost declined. I was afraid to step into Milo's world, where I might see my place in his life clearly, and realize I was just a temporary stop. But I went anyway. The bar was warm, golden lights, indie music playing just loud enough not to drown out talk. Milo's friends welcomed me naturally, no scrutiny, no questions. Jonah hugged Milo tight, then turned to me, smiling. So this is Everett, he said. I've heard a lot about you. I glanced at Milo. He looked a bit embarrassed, but didn't deny it. Throughout the evening, I watched Milo in his world. How he told stories, how he listened, how he touched my back lightly every time he came back to stand beside me. I realized one thing very clearly. Milo didn't hide me. He placed me in his life openly as an important part without needing to say it in words. On the way home, we walked, cool night wind. Milo draped his coat over me, even though I knew he was cold too. How was it? He asked. Good, I said truthfully. You have really nice friends. Milo was silent for a bit. I used to be really scared of bringing someone into my friend's circle, he said. But with you, I'm not scared. That sentence made my heart tighten. A few days later, I got a reminder email for the Chicago deadline. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop. That evening, I went to Milo's apartment, bringing a bottle of wine, as if I needed an excuse for a serious talk. Do you think, I started, as we sat on the living room floor, that sometimes staying is also a form of courage? Milo looked at me, his eyes deeper than usual. You're talking about Chicago. I nodded. I'm afraid if I go, I'll lose you. But I'm also afraid if I stay, I'll blame you, even though that's not fair. Milo set his glass down, moving closer to me. Everett, he said slowly, I don't need you to sacrifice for me. But I need to know if you stay, it's because you want to build something, not because you're afraid of losing. I took a deep breath. Milo was always like that, not clinging but not accepting half measures. That night, we didn't make love. We just held each other, talking late, about unfinished dreams, about versions of ourselves in the future. Milo confessed he'd once moved cities for someone, and when that relationship ended, he felt rootless. I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself, he said. But I also don't want to pretend this isn't important. The next morning, I woke up alone in Milo's apartment. He'd left for work early, leaving a small note on the table. Whatever you choose, I hope it's one that makes you feel true to yourself. I carried that note all day. In the end, I turned down the position in Chicago. Not because of Milo. At least not just because of Milo. I realized what I wanted to build. A career tied to urban stories, to people and spaces I loved, was here. New York still had so much I hadn't touched. And Milo was part of here. When I told him my decision, Milo didn't overjoy. He just hugged me tight for a long time. Thank you, he said softly, for choosing consciously. That evening, for the first time, Milo said, I love you. Those 3 words didn't scare me like I'd thought. I felt a strange peace, as if I'd just laid the first brick for a real home. Me too, I replied. And this time I didn't doubt myself. We didn't know what the future would bring. But in that moment, I believed that Milo and I, 2 men who'd feared in different ways, were learning to stay, to build something gentle, slow, but enduring together. Saying, I love you, didn't make everything perfect. If anything changed, it was the level of honesty we allowed between us. Love didn't erase fear. It just brought fear out of the shadows. After that day, Milo started staying at my apartment more. Not for convenience or laziness, but because we both implicitly understood. This was where we wanted to come back to. He brought a few clothes, a small potted plant by the window, a low-maintenance cactus. Like you, Milo smiled. What do you mean? Quiet, but resilient. We learned to live together through very ordinary collisions. Milo liked waking early, opening windows, letting sunlight flood the bedroom, which made me grumble because I loved darkness and silence. I had a habit of leaving books scattered everywhere. Milo hated disorganized clutter. We argued about those little things, then learned to compromise in small but necessary ways. One evening, while cooking, Milo accidentally broke the porcelain bowl I'd bought for my first trip to Paris. The only item I kept from an old relationship. I froze. Milo stood still, holding the broken piece. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I'll find a way to fix it, or... It's okay. I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm. I realized it as I said it. It's just a bowl. But that night, when Milo slept, I sat up alone, gathering the shards, and realized I wasn't sad about the bowl. I was sad about an old version of myself, the one clinging to past things out of fear of having nothing else. Milo, with a small accident, had helped me let go. Milo had his off days too. There were evenings he came home with weary eyes, almost shut, carrying worries about his career future. His startup wasn't growing as expected, and investor meetings made him doubt his own value. I'm afraid I'm not good enough, he said once, face buried in my chest. Afraid one day you'll see me as small. I held him tighter. You're not small, I said. You're just in the middle of the process. Those words I was also learning to say to myself. We started building shared routines, things that seemed trivial but gradually formed a new rhythm of life. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, picking apples and artisanal bread. Wednesday evenings watching an episode, then turning off the TV midway to talk. Milo liked asking unexpected questions. What do you think you'll be like at 40? I didn't avoid anymore. I answered, even if incomplete. One night, Milo suggested, let's try couples therapy. I was surprised. Do we have big problems? Milo shook his head. No. But I want us to have a safe space to say hard things before they become problems. The idea scared and grateful me. I agreed. The first session was in a small room with soft lighting. The therapist asked why we were there. Milo looked at me, then said, we love each other, and we want to learn to love without hurting each other. That sentence made my eyes sting. On the way home, I held Milo's hand in the crowded street. This time, I didn't let go. I realized building gentleness wasn't avoiding every crack, but learning to repair them together before they spread. And in those very ordinary moments, a burnt dinner, a longer-than-planned conversation, a hug after a tiring day. I started believing happiness didn't need to be dazzling. It just needed to be real enough for both to want to stay. Summer hit New York noisily. The air grew thick, subways hot and crowded, the city breathing heavier. But that summer I felt lighter than ever. Milo and I were no longer testing if it was okay. We were living in something real with sweat, clashes, and unexpectedly peaceful moments. We decided to go away for a few days. A short road trip to Maine. No detailed plans, no packed schedule. Just a rental car, a shared playlist, and a desire to leave the city to breathe deeper. Milo drove. I sat shotgun, watching the scenery change. Buildings getting shorter, more trees, sky opening up. Milo placed his hand on my thigh at red lights, a small gesture that warmed my heart. "Do you see?" he said, eyes on the road. "We're going somewhere." "Yeah," I replied. "And you're not scared." We stayed in a small wooden cabin near the sea. The first night, waves crashed steadily, salty air seeping through the windows. Milo stood on the porch, thin t-shirt, hair messy from the wind. I stepped out, hugging him from behind. "You look very here," I said. Milo chuckled softly. "You too." That night, we were intimate as if nothing left to prove. Not urgent craving, but a slow harmony, like two people who'd learned each other's language through touches. Milo whispered my name, voice hoarse. I responded, feeling connection not just in bodies, but in the trust that tomorrow we'd still be here. The next morning, we woke early, walked along the beach. Milo told me about his childhood in Colorado. Long afternoons, cold winters, and always having to be tougher than needed. "I'm used to handling things alone," he said. "With you, I'm learning to rely." That sentence made me stop. I looked at Milo, this man who'd entered my life gently, then stayed with rare patience. I realized that while Milo learned to lean on me, I was learning not to withdraw when someone needed. But even on that trip, our differences showed. One evening, on the porch, Milo talked about going freelance if the startup didn't last. He was excited about more freedom, flexibility. I worried about finances, uncertainty. "Don't you trust me?" Milo asked, voice not sharp, but a bit hurt. "I trust you," I said. "I'm just afraid we're betting too much on something uncertain." The mood dipped. Milo turned away, looking at the sea. I realized I'd unconsciously spoken like someone wanting control, not a partner. That night, we had our first real fight. Not yelling, not harsh words, but enough to hurt both. Milo said he feared I only loved his safe version. I said I feared carrying us both if things collapsed. We voiced fears we'd kept hidden, laying them bare between us. Naked, undefended. In the end, Milo sat beside me, voice tired. "I don't need you to promise everything will be okay," he said. "I just need you to stand with me when it's not." I held his hand. "I'll learn," I said. "Learn not to run ahead of fear." We didn't resolve everything that night, but we stayed. Sat together until dark, until wind colder, until anger faded, making way for a fragile but real understanding. On the drive back to New York, we were quieter. But it wasn't distance. It was the silence of two people digesting a new truth. That loving each other wasn't just feeling, but repeated choice. To listen, adjust, not leave when things got complicated. And when the city appeared ahead, with all its familiar noise, I knew we'd returned not just with good memories, but with a stronger foundation for the gentleness we continued to build. Fall returned to the city in a very different way. No longer the fall of first meeting Milo, hesitant, fragile, full of unnamed possibilities. This fall smelled of familiarity. Dry leaves crunching underfoot, scarves ready on hooks, and Milo, here, truly here, not as a temporary guest. We decided to move to a new apartment. Not much bigger, but enough to be ours. One bedroom, a shared workspace, and a small balcony overlooking the elevated train. When signing the lease, Milo held my hand tight. I looked at our two signatures side by side on the paper, feeling something strange. Not fear, but gentle responsibility. Moving was a challenge. Not because of stuff, but memories. Each box flipped open a part of life. Milo found old photos of mine, faces once important. He wasn't jealous, just silent, then asked, "You tried really hard, didn't you?" I nodded. "But you're the first who makes me want to try differently." Milo revealed his pieces, 2 old sketchbooks full of unfinished ideas, notes on a future he once dared not believe real. I saw in Milo a desire like mine, to be chosen not out of need but want. We started talking about farther things. Not marriage yet, but family. Milo talked about his mom, the woman who'd taken years to understand her son. But once she did, loved with all quietness. I talked about my dad, who still emailed asking if I ate enough, but never if I was happy, and how I was learning not to blame him. One evening, after therapy, Milo said, "I think we should adopt a cat." I laughed. "That's a big leap." "Not bigger than moving in," he replied, very matter-of-fact. We adopted Oliver, a gray cat, older than most chews, with a small scar on his ear. Milo said, "He looks like he's lived long enough to understand staying." I didn't argue. Oliver became part of the new rhythm. Mornings, Milo fed the cat, I made coffee. Evenings, Oliver curled between us on the sofa, like concrete proof we were caring for something shared. Then the setback came, not huge, but enough to test the foundation again. Milo's startup officially closed. He came home early that day, face blank. I didn't ask. I just pulled him close. Milo didn't cry right away. He sat long, back straight, as if still trying to play the strong one. "I feel like a failure," he said finally. I pressed my forehead to his. "You're just ending a chapter that no longer fits." The months after weren't easy. Milo started freelancing, income unsteady. I covered most rent without saying much. There were nights I lay awake, worried, even annoyed at myself for it. But instead of silence, I spoke. And Milo listened. No defense. No ego. "Thank you for saying," he said. "I don't want to be something you endure quietly." We learned a new lesson. Love isn't hiding burdens to protect each other, but sharing them, so no one collapses alone. One late fall evening, Milo cooked a simple dinner, pasta and cheap wine. We ate on the balcony, hearing trains pass. Milo raised his glass. "To us," he said, "for not leaving when things got hard." I clinked. "To gentleness," I replied. Wind cold, but my heart warm. I looked at Milo, the imperfect man choosing me every day. And for the first time, I didn't see the future as scary. It was just a place we'd go, together. Winter came earlier than expected. Snow fell first on a morning Milo forgot his alarm. He scrambled up, rushed into his coat, while I stood at the kitchen door, handing him hot coffee. Milo leaned down for a quick kiss, then paused. "Do you see?" he said, pointing to the window. "Snow." We stood together a while, silent, watching the city dusted thin white. Oliver curled at our feet, lazy. A small moment, but I realized, this is home. Milo started getting more freelance projects. Not steady, but enough to regain confidence. He worked at the desk across from me, headphones on, occasionally removing them for my opinion on a design. I liked being needed in that ordinary way, not to rescue but to accompany. One evening, washing dishes, Milo said casually, I want to be here long-term." I turned to him. "Here meaning?" "Here," he repeated, smiling. "With you. In this apartment. In this life." I didn't answer right away. Not from hesitation, but wanting to say it right. "Me too," I said finally. "I've chosen already." We didn't mark that decision with a big milestone. No party, no announcement. Just the days after, flowing with gentle certainty, as if we both knew we were heading the same way. Near year's end, I was invited to speak at a small urban architecture conference. Not big, but something I'd wanted long. Milo sat front row, attentive. When I finished, his eyes on me shone. A quiet but real pride. That night, we got home late. Milo opened a leftover fall wine bottle. "You know," he said, head on my shoulder, "I used to think I was only good at starting. But with you, I've learned to continue." That sentence stayed with me long. A few weeks later, on a very ordinary evening, no anniversary, no special occasion, I came home early. Milo was on the living room floor playing with Oliver. He looked up, surprised. "What's up?" I didn't answer right away. I just knelt before him. No ring, no speech. Just me and Milo and the room we'd built with time and patience. "Do you want," I said slowly, "to keep building this with me? Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it?" Milo looked at me long. I saw his eyes redden, but his smile didn't fade. "I'm already here," he said, voice trembling slightly. "Have been for a long time." We hugged, sitting on the floor, amid train sounds and the cat's annoyed meow for being ignored. No fireworks, but a clear feeling that we just placed the last brick on our foundation. The months after passed not fast, not slow, just right. There were tiring days, disagreements, but no more fear of leaving. Each fight, we returned to the table, the sofa, the familiar question, what do we need to understand each other better? On an early spring evening, Milo and I stood on the balcony, watching the city light up. Milo rested his head on my shoulder. "Do you think," he asked, "we've built what we wanted yet?" I thought a moment. "I think we've built a place to continue." Milo smiled. "That's enough." I looked at the man beside me. Not perfect, not promising an unchanging future, but staying, choosing to stay, every day. And I understood our love wasn't defined by grand moments. It was built from snowy mornings, simple dinners, hard talks, and the persistent presence of two men who'd once feared, but chose gentleness with each other. We didn't build something perfect. We built something real. And that, for me, is happiness.